This is session BC7729, Intelligent HA, Application Awareness with VMware HA. My name is Benjot Chanana. I'm the Group Manager for Availability Solutions at VMware. And joining me on stage is Saveen Pakala, who's Product Manager with Symantec for their Windows and x86 virtualization. So we'll just get going and run into the session here. But maybe just as a quick overview of the agenda, we'll give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to go over what we think is a significant gap or problem in virtualization environments that we are here to discuss and actually provide some alternatives for. We'll go into some detail about a joint solution that we're very proud to announce together from VMware and Symantec. And then you'll see a demo of the solution as well. So we'll walk through exactly what this solution can do and take your questions and show you some future direction of where we want to head with this as well. So as we get started, let me start with a question to you, to the crowd, and ask you if you could raise your hands if you are virtualizing your x86 environment today. That's an easy question. Okay. Keep your hands raised, actually. So for those of you virtualizing today, how many of you are virtualizing your mission-critical applications? Keep your hands raised if you are. Great. How many of you are virtualizing those applications with some sort of OS clustering in place? Okay. And how many of you are delaying those virtualization plans as a result of not being able to provide the availability you're looking for? Okay, so a couple hands there. So what we want to talk to you about today is exactly that gap. As some of you may have noticed as you look around the room, you notice that there's lots of virtualization plans, there's lots of movement of applications to your virtual infrastructure. However, as you start to hit beyond the Tier 3 and Tier 2 apps to those mission-critical apps where availability is not a benefit of virtualizing, but really a requirement. It's a hard requirement to make sure that app can actually sit on a virtual infrastructure and maintain its uptime. When you've got to actually sign up for those SLAs, we start to see a lot of tail off in those virtualization plans. And it's really as a result of the importance of the application itself, the availability of that app. So as you guys realize, just by looking around the room, you'll see that there are some very critical services in your infrastructure for which you cannot take that downtime for even the couple of minutes that HA provides, and for which you've got to have full visibility into the running state of the application. And that's exactly the gap that we've heard from customers over the last couple of years, certainly at VMware. It's something we've taken to heart. And what we've done is we want to look to how we can close that gap very quickly and provide an alternative for you that allows you to fully leverage your infrastructure, fully leverage the virtual infrastructure that you've put into place. So as you can see, some of the key challenges, this is from data from IDC, key challenges in virtualizing are ensuring the application availability. And some of the key concerns really we heard from customers is that just because my VM is running doesn't necessarily mean that my application is running. Just because my VM has booted up doesn't necessarily mean that the application is actually servicing requests. And just because application processes are running doesn't necessarily mean the application is functional completely. So these are the kind of gaps that exist today between providing the core benefits from the virtualization platform with VMware HA and what you're actually looking for. So we've taken this to heart, and we've kind of explored this problem further, and we realized there's really kind of a push and pull here from two different entities inside the organization. There's the application guy who says, look, I've got to have the SLA for my app. My app matters. Everyone relies on this thing. We've got to make sure that the application is always running. And the infrastructure guy who says, I can provide services to you, and at the same time, I need to make sure that I can leverage all the benefits of scale in the infrastructure so I can ensure that we can do things at a large scale for every application, not just your application. So there's this push and pull from the guy who's really focused on his app versus the guy who's got to service lots of applications. And so what does this mean when you've got to provide this uptime? You've really only got a couple alternatives. The alternatives today, one is you use OS-based clustering inside your virtual machines. It's certainly possible to do. In some cases, it's even supported. In some cases, not. However, you give up some of the benefits that the infrastructure owner, the guy who owns the servers and the infrastructure, really takes to heart, which are vMotion, DRS, DPM, fault tolerance, even HA. All of these capabilities that we've come to know and love as part of the virtualization infrastructure cannot be used in conjunction with these OS-based clustering mechanisms. The other option is you look at some sort of monitoring or scripting solution. I think everyone knows the pitfalls here. Who's going to own that monitor? Who's going to own that script? Who's going to provide the kind of short time to root cause analysis? Can you actually get to a root cause analysis quickly with these types of solutions? And of course, the script goes back and forth between the two teams. You own it, no, you own it, no, you own it. The guy who just owned it left, now you own it. So it goes back and forth. The last option is, of course, the worst, particularly from my point of view, is that you delay your virtualization plans completely, which means that you can't leverage the virtualization infrastructure you've got in place. So this stuff remains physical in order to provide that uptime, and becomes more and more difficult to manage over time as more of the environment becomes virtual. So we think that's really not a great option for anybody, and neither the application owner nor the infrastructure owner really gain any benefit from that. So there's this constant trade-off, we think, between the providing the application availability that's needed for the app, ensuring that you're not introducing new complexities in the environment which may actually negate some of the benefits of virtualizing. So you want to fully exploit your benefits of virtualizing, maintain your simplicity, and still keep the app running. And we think we can offer something interesting in this regard. So we're going to explore all three of these areas in detail. So the first, let me introduce what we've been working on with the folks at Symantec. We've basically decided to really cut the world in two. They own the application up the stack. We're gonna own the infrastructure. What we've asked them to do really, and what they've taken on really is providing all of the knowledge and history they have around providing application uptime and the application monitoring capabilities of VCS, of Veritas Cluster Services, and putting that on top of HA and really integrating the two so that we have a full integrated solution that allows you to fully leverage the benefits of virtualizing as well. So VMware HA with the extension that allows Symantec to build what we're calling application HA on top of VMware HA. Let me dive into a little bit more detail about how this actually works. So quick overview, you guys are all familiar with HA and the benefits we've provided. Just some key data points. Actually, let me get a quick show of hands. How many folks run VMware HA turned on in their environment today? Right. And folks running VMware fault tolerance in their environment today? Yeah. So we see greater than 90% penetration inside most customers for VMware HA. Usually kind of on by default, provides the basic protections you need to keep your environment running. And the simplicity of running it, the ease of use is really what we focused on, making it a core part of the infrastructure. We did this based on what we thought were some observations in this space around how the IT environment really works, and we saw that one of the key issues was you want to actually provide enough automated remediation to take the humans out of the mix. Humans are the ones that make the mistakes. Yes, we're the ones at fault. So what we've done is we've tried to provide a capability that's as automated as possible, as easy to use as possible, and easy to configure as possible. That was really the goal behind both HA and fault tolerance. And providing that protection across the entire infrastructure was a key value point. We wanted to ensure we protect not just your mission-critical apps, but all the applications that you depend on, and raise the bar of availability across the entire environment. So our goals were really focused around simplicity, ease of use, but breadth of coverage as well. And so to that end, in vSphere 4, we announced VMware Fault Tolerance, which many of you were aware of, is actually the most heavily used feature inside vSphere 4. So as we got feedback from the field, this is actually the most prolific new feature of vSphere 4. Now, a little bit about how we've extended HA to move forward to allow the solution, to allow application HA to really sit on top of it and provide and close that gap of application availability. What we did was we actually announced this in vSphere 4.1, so just GA'd recently. We announced the availability of this API that is built out of HA. The API effectively allows in-guest agents or in-guest availability agents to heartbeat back to VMware HA, providing two things. One is a notification of the running state of that application. The presence of that heartbeat indicates to us that everything is okay inside the guest, and we can take that information and actually pull it back up to vCenter and make it visible to you. So part of this was to make sure that the visibility of the application running state is actually transported all the way up the stack to vCenter. So the API at a very basic level first provides this heartbeat mechanism which allows that visibility. But second, in the case that remediations inside the guest, inside the VM, are not possible, that you're attempting to restart the application and is not able to do so, you can call VMware HA and we will actually do the full VM restart from the outside. So what this does is it provides the automated remediation when, as a last resort, this is the only option left. So in vSphere 4.1, you'll see this. This is just a quick, on the right here, you see the dialog box. You can now configure not only VM monitoring, which monitors for OS, that the OS is actually running using VMware tools. You can now also configure application monitoring, which allows a third-party agent, specifically in this case application HA, to heartbeat back through the same channel and also provide us visibility of the running state of the application. So at this point, let me actually hand it over to Saveen to discuss more details on the solution itself.
All right. Thanks, Banjot. So application HA leverages the API that Banjot just talked about to add app awareness to VMware HA and make sure that we can recover from all sorts of failure from infrastructure up to the application. And let me use a simple example here to illustrate how the overall solution works. So a simple example here, two ESX boxes. One of them has two virtual machines running Oracle and SQL respectively. VMware HA is protecting or providing infrastructure HA in this environment. If the server fails, VMware HA restarts the virtual machines on the other side. Pretty basic stuff. What happens if the application, as part of the startup process, VM startup process, fails to start or starts at this point but fails in the near future? And that's where application HA comes in. Application HA monitors the application on a continual basis, detects the failures as soon as it happens, and tries to take remedial actions. The most basic remedial action it's going to take is restart the application a few number of times, and that's user configurable. In most cases, that will take care of the situation. There will be some scenarios where no matter how many times you restart, the application, it still fails. And that's where we'll use the API that Banjot just outlined and let VMware HA know that, hey, there's something going on. You need to deal with it. This could be things like memory leak issues, just freezing up the VM. It could be virtual memory fragmentation in the case of Exchange, and it's just refusing to mount the Exchange databases, and any of those issues which really cannot be addressed from inside the virtual machine. And that's where VMware HA comes in to break that loop and basically restart the virtual machine. And this will, in most cases, take care of the problem. So together, application HA and VMware HA give you protection against a wide range of failures from infrastructure to all the way up to the application. Now let's double-click on the solution and see a little bit more into details kind of how the solution works. Central to this solution is really, the most critical thing is deep understanding of the application. Understanding an application really involves understanding all the different components, different processes that make up the application, the resources it's using, understanding how to start and stop the application, understand how to monitor the application, be able to tell the difference between up and down, up and functional. So all these things really, the application level insights are encoded into app-specific modules, or what we call as agents, that plug into the application HA framework, right? So if you take SQL 2008 agent as an example, it basically knows the fact that, hey, a SQL 2008 server can have multiple database instances. It could have file stream service, analysis service, and the way they depend on each other. And it'll obviously know how to monitor the application, start and stop it, look at the process table and be able to tell whether or not the app is up. And more importantly, it can actually go further and use SQL queries to see that the SQL server is actually functional, not just up, but serving SQL queries like add and remove table entries, for instance. And that will change depending on the application. But this is just an example of what we do inside an agent. So in the first release, we're going to support some of the key enterprise applications, such as SQL Exchange, Oracle, SAP, WebLogic, et cetera, across both Windows and Linux operating systems. One of the things we recognize is that this is obviously not a comprehensive list of the applications that you have in an environment. We basically have a model where every quarter we update our application support so that you get most of the applications that you have in an environment supported out of the box. So this is the first list, but it's a dynamic living list, and we'll keep on adding support for new applications. And one thing I'll note here is that these applications or the insights that are baked into these application agents have been built over a period of time through the legacy of Veritas Cluster Server. So we really have battle tested and understood the applications through several customer engagements, and all of that has been baked into the agents that plug into application HA. So the application HA framework watches the status as reported from the agents, and then reports to VMware HA through a heartbeat mechanism to let VMware HA know that everything is okay. So a loss of heartbeat tells VMware HA that something is wrong. So if something fails inside the VM, application HA will restart it, but keep sending heartbeat to VMware HA and letting it know that, hey, everything is okay, I'm taking care of the situation. As soon as application HA finds out that, hey, it's not helping, that's when it stops sending the heartbeat, and VMware HA will know what to do with it. It'll restart the virtual machine. Now, in most cases, this behavior will fit your needs, but in some cases, you may want to customize that to fit your environment, right? So we do have certain knobs that you can turn. You can set the limit for application or VM restart. You could say, hey, don't restart the application more than twice, or don't restart the virtual machine more than once. That's completely user configurable. You could have situations where you want the app recovery, but you don't want VM restart. Or maybe you have cases where you don't want any remediation. All you want is monitoring for some time, maybe during planned maintenance activities, where you're bringing down the application knowingly to do some admin operations. Right? So you can customize that to fit your needs. That's basically the point. So as you can see, we've taken care of a lot of the different scenarios to improve your availability. Equally important is to make sure that you're not losing on any of the virtualization benefits that VMware brings to the table. So things like vMotion, DRS, et cetera, you really want to be able to leverage that as much as possible. And we're focused on that to make sure that the application HA is fully supported with all these different VMware capabilities, including vMotion, so you can vMotion the VMs around. Certainly HA as well as DRS, DPM. So for instance, if the VM, one of the ESX boxes fail, you can restart, HA will restart the VM on the other box. Or power management could kick in and say that, you know what, I'm going to evacuate this ESX box, move the virtual machines around, and get rid of this box, and things like that. This is a significant issue if you're using OS-based clustering solutions like MSCS or Red Hat clustering, where you're not able to use vMotion as soon as you put the clustering solutions inside the guest across 2 or more running virtual machines. And one of the other limitations that OS-based clustering brings to the table is it limits the storage access options that you have, right? With application HA, on the other hand, you really have full flexibility in deciding how you want to access your storage, whether it be on Fiber Channel, iSCSI, NAS. You could also decide how you want the volumes to be served up to the host. It could be virtual disks over VMFS or RDM. It doesn't really matter. And likewise, no complexity or risk associated with things like setting up quorum disks, setting up fencing, etc. Given the fact that everything is actually contained within a single virtual machine, and that same virtual machine is actually getting restarted either on the same box or a different box. You don't really have to coordinate between 2 or more clustered nodes. Let me double-click on vMotion specifically because that's really the underlying capability that enables DRS and DPM, things like that. So first of all, no virtual SCSI bus sharing required. Like I mentioned, there's only one VM, so you don't really have to share the bus with other virtual machines, and that enables you to use vMotion. We also have added another additional level of protection to make sure that when vMotion is triggered, it's possible that application HA is not able to send the heartbeat within the given amount of time that VMware HA is expecting the heartbeats, right? So what we will do is, as soon as vMotion is triggered and vMotion is about to stun the VM, VMware HA will disable the heartbeat and not expect application HA to send the heartbeat. And after, sorry about that. And after vMotion unstuns the virtual machine, that's when it'll restart expecting the heartbeat. So, we're protected during that time that, we will not inadvertently restart any virtual machine. Okay? And in that whole process, application HA will continue to monitor your application and restart. It doesn't really have to stop doing that. In fact, you could have an app restart after you've started the vMotion activity, and that's okay. All right, so all that is great. Ensures availability, ensures that you can continue to exploit virtualization. Now let's turn to some of the things that application HA and VMware HA bring to the table to minimize complexity in your environment. So I'm going to start with deployment, install and config. So it's really easy to deploy, as you'll see in the demo in a few minutes. But if you start from scratch for a medium-sized environment, you could be done in minutes. With very few user inputs. I think a basic install could, you don't even have to give more than 5 inputs. So it's really streamlined. We've done a lot of the work on the back end, so it doesn't get exposed to you as you're trying to set things up. Very, very close to how you would set up VMware HA, or we have tried to make it as simple as it is to set up VMware HA. So install really 2 steps. The first step is to install the plugin, the vCenter plugin, which you'll use to manage and visualize the application. So you'll put that in one of the VMs. We call it the App HA console server, so you can put that plugin there. And the next step is to install the guest components that go inside every virtual machine where you want application HA. And the installer is actually pretty smart. It'll let you select the set of virtual machines from a tree-like view that you see in vSphere Client on the left-hand side. So you'll see the same sort of view. And you can select a bunch of VMs there. Or you could also select VMware HA cluster and say that, all VMs in this VMware HA cluster, go install it there. And we'll basically take it from there. We'll push install all the bits to all the guest OSs simultaneously. So it's pretty streamlined, very, very easy to get the bits at the right place. The next step, obviously, is to configure those bits. And that's actually even simpler. So once you've installed the plugin, you go to that plugin, you log into vSphere Client, you go to the new tab called Application HA, pick the VM where you want to start app monitoring, and the only thing you really have to do is pick the application for which you need to start the monitoring. And everything else is done behind the scenes. So we'll auto-discover all the resources that the application needs, right? So in the case of SQL 2008, for instance, it'll find out all the database instances, the various services, the storage mount points that it's using, what are the dependencies, etc., and basically do the configuration at the back end so AppHA knows what to monitor, what to expect. Notice that there is none of these, the cost and complexity associated with traditional clustering. No standby VMs, no having to pay for additional hardware or OS and application license costs. And certainly you don't have to manage multiple OS instances, so every time you patch the OS or the application, you don't have to do it multiple number of times. It's really the same VM that's being used all over the place. So very, very easy to deploy. Once deployed, it also is very easy to manage on an ongoing basis. One of the things that we do is make all the application level insight available in vSphere Client. So without application HA, if let's say somebody logs into vSphere Client, this is what they'll see typically on a conceptual basis. They'll see everything from the VM or virtualization point of view. They'll see, let me see if I can use the mouse here. From data center down to VMware HA cluster to ESX and down to the virtual machine level. But that's where the visibility stops. The virtual machine, all the VMs basically appear as black boxes. They, don't really know what's running inside the virtual machine, let alone the status of that application and be able to control it. So if anything fails inside the virtual machine, the infrastructure team doesn't really find that out till somebody from the app team gives them a call, right? And similarly, if the infrastructure team, let's say they want to do a planned maintenance activity, let's say they want to upgrade the OS or they want to upgrade the hardware, they need to really find out who the app owners are and have them start and stop the application when they need it, right? So there is now this manual coordination that needs to happen and really takes a long time. And it gets worse when there are failures just to do the root cause analysis and get to a resolution. So application HA, what it does is adds an additional layer of insight within the same context as vSphere, which is used to manage virtual machines on an ongoing basis. And additionally, also give you the ability to start and stop the application from this exact same context. Really cuts out all the coordination that has to happen between these teams on a manual basis, leading to just faster root cause analysis and remediation. Now, as we talk about different teams and Virtual Center or vSphere client, one of the topics I've seen come up very commonly is who gets access to Virtual Center? What is that person supposed to do? What should that person be not allowed to do, and things like that. So this whole discussion about access control to vSphere client or vCenter. One of the things we have done is added new privileges that are specific to application HA. And you can use those privileges to extend your existing roles in vCenter or create new roles, right? So for instance, if an operator with guest role logs in, that person can see the status of the applications that are running inside the virtual machine, but nothing else. So it's really maybe a front-end operator who all that person needs to do is make sure that everything is up and running. If you log in as an operator, in addition to what the guest can do, you can also start and stop the application, right? And finally, if you're an admin, then you can also do configuration changes. You can configure new applications. You can completely unconfigure the app monitoring. You can enter and exit maintenance modes. You can change attributes, things like that. So you can do a whole lot of things as an admin. And you can do all of that in addition to everything that the guest and the operator can do. So teams can hopefully use these privileges and roles to come up with a model, access model, that fits with their existing processes and hopefully takes out some of the awkwardness or the challenges that exist in giving access to Virtual Center. Now, that said, it's possible that some app teams will just not be given vCenter access. End of story. Anybody here who falls into that bucket? Wow, everybody has vCenter access. So maybe this slide is not going to be that useful. But there is one thing which will make this slide useful. And let me talk about that. So in situations where the app teams don't have access to vSphere client, or if they have it, but they find it limited because the applications that they're expected to manage, in almost all cases, if it's a critical app, it's also a multi-tier app, right? So it has a web tier, it has an app tier, and it has a database tier. And in many cases, these application components run across physical and virtual, right? And in a lot of cases, they also run across operating systems. So vSphere client really helps me do a great job with my VMware environment. But what about the rest of the stuff that, by the way, has dependency on my application components that's running on VMware? And that's where Veritas Operations Manager, or WOM, comes in. It's the console that we use at Symantec or provide for managing storage and availability. It's the one single management console, just like vSphere client is for VMware. And by using that, users can visualize visualize the status of an application, of a multi-tier application. So for instance, if you have a trading app with, let's say, web tier running on VMware, an app and database tier running on physical or other operating systems, you can see all of that as one single logical entity and say, okay, is this application up or down? If I want to bring this whole application down or restart it, it's just one-click operations. All of that can be done from the Veritas Operations Manager. And we'll make sure that all the dependencies, or the order of the dependencies, are taken care of. You can also tie the start and stop of virtual machine to the start and stop of the application itself. So if you're trying to start an application that's configured to run on a virtual machine that's currently powered off, we'll just go ahead and restart that, or power up that virtual machine. So it really makes it easier for you to get to a running state for the overall end-to-end service. All right, I think that's basically the run-up to the demo. So unless there are any questions, I was just going to switch to the demo. Are there any questions? And I think there are mics there, so you can use them. Or
Is there an API to build your own application to communicate with HA?
I believe the answer is yes, and I'll let...
let me just repeat the question. Is there an API to build your own kit to do your application integration? Is that? Yeah. So today we're only offering the access to the API. The SDK is only available to a limited set of partners, Symantec being one of them. We are not offering it publicly yet. However, we hope to do so at some point. So at some point it will be more available. But currently today is just in limited distribution. Yes.
Okay, so if I heard the question, first one was, do you have notification? Logging and notification. And secondly, what's the pricing model? So yes, there is logging and there is notification as well. You can rely on some of the vCenter notifications that you get, and you'll get that when the application state changes. It'll get consolidated at the VM level, and you can listen for that. For the pricing model, it is per VM. That's the pricing model that we're going to use.
Is there any integrations with VMware Update Manager? Not today. So today it's not integrated with VMware Update Manager. However, that is something that we could potentially look at in the future.
Questions?
So it's kind of look like vSphere that you can feed in Infinity. You got a multi-tier app that say you have 3 web front-end servers, a couple middleware, and a database. It will feed in Infinity with all those virtual machines and know what's ordered to bring them back in.
So yes and no. The question was, do we actually create affinity between virtual machines to represent the grouping of the application and the dependencies? Right. So I think the answer is sort of yes and no. We look at the application layer almost independently of the virtual machines. So think of application layer as a layer sitting on top of the virtual machines, and we'll create dependencies between them, right? And some of the dependencies are going outside of virtual machines as well. So we make sure that the VM is, of course, started and running, but the application dependencies sort of comes as a next step, and we make sure that those dependencies are met when we look at that application level entity. So the focus is the application. All right, so moving on to the demo, we're going to go through 5 quick sub-demos. I think there's a question. Okay, so it was a little bit hard to hear, but so is the question that if something's wrong with the application itself? Mm-hmm. Right. So the question is, what happens if the OS state is damaged or corrupted and the application state is corrupted? Yeah, and in that situation, yes, restarting the VM is not going to help. That is correct. So we are looking at ways in which you can just move the application. But as soon as you start to do that, you're now taking a lot of complexity of running standby VMs, and we're trying to see how we can solve that without taking on all that complexity. And this will be the last question before I move to the demo. Yep. So roadmap. So we'll something that we've thought about, and what we're trying to do is make sure that you can create these point-in-time snapshots very easily. And if so for whatever reason your application hasn't come up, you can just go back to the last known good state and go from there. All right, so 5 sub-demos. They're going to be real quick. They're pretty short. Like I said, it's actually pretty easy to set up, so it's not going to be very lengthy. First one is just installing the plugin or the application HA console, installing the application HA guest components, configuring SQL 2008, then doing some start-stop kind of ongoing operations on SQL, and then seeing how we do failure detection and recovery. So this is going to be a recorded demo just to keep it simple from a logistics perspective. But if you want to see the live demo, you can go to the booth, And we have a setup there with a lot more stuff in the demo, so you can get a real sense for how the product works and maybe even play with it. So I'm going to start with the install of application HA console or the plugin. So this is basically when you hit setup in the installer, this is what you would see, and really only two steps, either install the plugin or the guest component. So we'll pick the first one. No, this is the product installer. So you just install the product. Start the installer, and you'll see this come up. And just give me a second here.
I think it's asking if this is on the vSphere server or on a different server. The installation of that.
This is actually done on the application HA console server. So wherever you're going to run the plugin, that's the place where you run the installer from.
Can that be Virtual Center?
Can that be Virtual Center? So I'll let Banjot expand on that because that's been a topic of debate between us. But you technically can, but it's not a best practice.
Yeah, right. So we don't recommend installing it on the same. We don't recommend installing it on the same server as Virtual Center for only the reason that the two should not share the same kind of web server sitting on the same box. However, if you want to have two instances running, two web server instances running on that box, then it is possible. Best practice is really to separate it out onto its own server.
All right. I almost thought that we hit a demo bug, and we may still have. We'll see. All right. So we basically hit the install button. The welcome screen, you accept the EULA, and then basically provide the vCenter details, the host name or the IP address of the vCenter server, and provide the username and password. And this is really the only screen where you need to provide the inputs, and that's all you need to provide in order to get the plugin installed. And after that, there's just a few screens where we'll show what we're doing, and all you need to do is just make sure that everything is okay. You don't really have to provide any more inputs. This is the only screen where you do, as far as the plugin install is concerned. So just pre- and post-install summary. Going through the install. And usually it takes actually just a few minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes to get the plugin installed. Get the post-install summary. You can save it as a report, and that's basically it. The next thing is what we're going to do is install the guest component. So we're done with the plugin part. Go to the guest piece. So we'll pick the second option. Very similar to the plugin install workflow. Then you'll just accept the EULA. And then this screen is actually optional, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a second. But this is, again, asking for vCenter IP or hostname and vCenter credentials, username and password. I'll tell you what it means for this screen to be optional in just a second. But let's say you did provide that. Here is where you will select the virtual machines where you want to install. So you can either type in the name of the virtual machine in that text box, or you can hit browse and get that tree view that you're familiar with in a vSphere client left-hand side tree view. Right, so you can select multiple virtual machines here by control and click, or you can say, I'm not going to select individual virtual machines. I'm just going to select the VMware HA cluster. And you go figure out what that means, which virtual machines are protected within that VMware HA cluster, and go ahead and install to all the VMs in that scope. In order for you to get this screen, we need to go and talk to a virtual center, and that's why you need to provide those credentials that I talked about in the previous screen. But if you don't want to provide that, or this is done by a user who doesn't have access to virtual center, you can still go ahead and type in the virtual machine names. It's going to be a little bit more tedious, especially if you're installing in a large environment. But this is one way of kind of getting around that. And I'll talk about how we're trying to make it even simpler in the next release when I talk about the feature directions slide. So in this case, I've just gone ahead and selected the VMs. And we'll do a couple of background checks just to make sure it's those VMs you selected are running the OSs that we support and things like that. And basically start the install process after showing you the pre-install summary, and for some reason this is stuck. Okay. So let me actually go to plan B, which is individual demos, not one big demo. So how are we doing on time?
Okay.
We're okay? So I'm just going to rerun some of the screens that you just saw to get to the point where we got frozen. Apologize. All right, so we're going to skip this part and go to the SQL configuration workflow. All right, so for you to be able to configure SQL, you will go to the plugin that you just installed. You'll log in into vSphere Client. That's the first thing you would do. And this is all of you are familiar with this screen. We'll work with a virtual machine called SQL Demo, and you'll go to the Application HA tab. That's the new tab or new plugin that's got added with Application HA. The first thing, and this is by the only time you will have to provide username and password for the virtual machine where you're trying to configure things. Once it's set up, then you don't have to provide that again when you're trying to do ongoing management. But the first time when you're trying to set things up, you do have to provide this username and password. Once you provide that, we'll detect that the application is not configured, as you can see from the status over here. It's not configured, and the only option you have available is just configure application monitoring. Select that, and as you'll see, it's fairly simple. All you need to do here is select the application from this list that you want to monitor. So in this case, we want to monitor or protect SQL Server 2008. We'll select that, and that's basically it. This screen shows all the instances that we found that are running on that application, on that virtual machine. Right? So in this case, there are 2 instances, as well as some of the services that are running on that box. So by default, we'll select all of it. If you want to deselect some of them, that's optional, and you can do that. But otherwise, you just continue going, and we'll do everything else behind the scenes in terms of just setting things up. And really, that's all you had to do to get from scratch to a running state. Now you have application HA configured for SQL Server 2008 in those virtual machines. All right, so we'll go to the start, stop, and reboot use cases, or restart use cases. So everything is set up. Now you're looking at ongoing management. One of the most common things you do is being able to see the status of the application. Right, so let's just go to the Application HA Health tab, and you'll see the status of the application. That's the first thing, or the most important piece of information that you need. You can also get some of the details about that application. What are some of the instances? Which storage mount points it's using? Are all of them healthy? Things like that. So you get that additional level of detail. And then get a set of tasks that you can do on those applications. So start, stop, enable, disable, heartbeat, exit or enter, maintenance mode, things like that. So what we're going to do is first go to the virtual machine itself. We'll just go to that VM, start up SQL Config Manager, just one of the tools that DB is used commonly, just to make sure that what we're seeing in vSphere Client in that Application HA Health tab is indeed what's happening on the virtual machine. So you see a bunch of different SQL instances and the fact that they're running. So let's now go back to the vSphere Client and try to stop the application. So notice that once it's configured, it's really just one click. And this workflow, or the process of stopping an application, is the same regardless of whether you're trying to stop SQL on a Windows box or SAP on Linux box. It doesn't really matter. It's just one click, start, stop. So if you want to enable an operator team to do this, it's very straightforward. They don't need to understand the application in any depth. They just need to know that, hey, this is the right operation to do during the planned maintenance activities. So now so you see the status has changed to offline. You can go back to the VM and see that the status is stopped now. just to make sure we're in sync with what's really happening on the virtual machine. And then we'll just do the reverse. We'll start the application. Again, one click. Start the application. The status changes from offline to online. Again, just a quick check on the VM itself. So the status has changed from stop to running. And really, that's how easy it is to start and stop application from the vSphere client, the same console that you use to manage virtual machines. Now, let's move to the last part of the demo, which is, hey, let's inject some failures and see what happens. Right? That's really, this is all about. So what we're going to do is stop the SQL Server from this interface, which is completely outside of the context of application HA, right? Application HA doesn't know about this interface. So from application HA's point of view, it'll basically appear as a failure event, right? And we will detect that and do something about it. So let's just go ahead and stop from here. So we'll stop that in one of the instances. And as soon as it stops, application HA will detect that and restart the application. And if you go back to vSphere client, you'll see that the application has already restarted, and we have basically restored the state, and the application is online. Now, this will, like I said, this will take care of the situation for the most part, restarting the application. But in some cases, that may or may not be the case, right? May or may not happen. For instance, if you're just running so low on resources in that virtual machine that's taken up by everything else except your application, no amount of restarting that application is going to give you that resource that it needs, right? So, but restarting a virtual machine will kind of free up all that stuff that's taken up by rest of the applications or tools. So that's where you need VM level restart. So we're just going to go ahead and stop that application again, sort of to simulate the failure event that I was just trying to describe. And at this point, application HA is going to figure that the application is faulted and no amount of restarting is going to help. And this is when application HA triggers VMware HA to restart the virtual machine. Okay. Let's just go to the console of that virtual machine, and you'll see it's starting to reboot. So you'll just see the usual things that you see, and the state of the virtual machine as well as the application will go from faulted to partial and finally to online. So that's really what I wanted to show in terms of demo. Obviously, this is not a whole lot, but hopefully gives you a sense for how the product gets deployed and what's the look and feel, how do you interact with the product, and see how the failure events are detected and how does the recovery happen. So unless there are any questions, I want to switch back real quick to the presentation and finish up with the future directions and wrap up. Are there any questions on the demo itself?
Now, what about where do you put in the threads if you're using like a network account? You're not using SA and SQL, and you're not using the local admin, and you have separate accounts that control those services. Is there a place where you type those threads in there?
So is this about access control? I'm not sure if I fully understood your question. Okay. So for you to be able to do start and stop of the application, you need to be able to log into Virtual Center and have the privileges that we just talked about in the slide deck. You should be able to visualize the application or stop the application as an operator at a minimum. If you log in as guest, you won't be able to do that. All right, so let me talk a little bit about future directions. Where are we going from here? So what we have done, what we believe is that we have taken a huge step forward in helping you address some of the key challenges in virtualizing Tier 1 applications. But that's really the first step. We think that there are several other things in terms of enhancements that we could be doing, and I want to just give you a quick sense for what some of those are. So under the ensure availability bucket, we're working towards improving the speed of failure detection. So right now we are using a monitoring-based mechanism to find out as soon as the application fails. We want to move to an interrupt-driven model where as soon as the failure happens, we get notified that, hey, this failure has happened. So you spend less time in between two monitoring intervals to detect when a failure happens. We're going to expand the application and OS coverage in the next release. So we'll add SUSE, we'll add things like SharePoint, Enterprise Vault, etc. In the exploit virtualization bucket, just like we extended VMware HA with app awareness, we'll extend SRM as well as fault tolerance to become more application aware. Right, so if you think about fault tolerance, Banjo talked about that capability as one of the most widely used capabilities in 4.0. It certainly does a great job with recovering, with zero downtime from hardware level failures. But if an app inside the VM fails, FT will faithfully reproduce that failure in the standby VM as well, right? Because it doesn't really, it can't really tell the difference between running in a failed application. But if you have application HA inside the virtual machine, you can recover from that, and that recovered or the successful state is also replicated to the standby host. So that's something that we're working on. And finally, on the minimized complexity side, like somebody just asked, we're going to make the whole deployment model that we just talked about, deploying the guest components, deploying the plugin, we'll make all of that available from vSphere client itself. And then provide you a dashboard so that not only can you see the application from the context of a VM, but you can go to the VMware HA cluster level or the data center level and see the status of all the applications running across all the VMs and be able to do some sort of group operations. So you can say, select these set of apps, all SQL instances running across all these VMs, go stop them. Right, so you can now start to do some interesting things like that when you think about the broader scope inside a vSphere client. And this is the summary slide, the last slide. The problem that we have been working on for the last few months is ensuring availability, but not giving up on virtualization benefits or taking on additional complexity for the end user. And we have basically tried to address that by leveraging the best-of-breed technologies between both companies, VMware HA from the VMware side, as well as Veritas Cluster Server. We kind of leverage some of the technologies there to build application HA. And some of the benefits you'll get is certainly recover from app and infrastructure level failures, exploit virtualization benefits such as vMotion, DRS, DPM, and finally simplify operations for your different teams, the app teams and the infrastructure teams, with a solution that's super easy to deploy and super easy to manage. So what I would strongly encourage you guys to do is think about the challenges that you have in your virtualization initiatives currently and how they apply to tier 1 applications, and see how the solution we discussed fits with that. You can download the white paper that we jointly wrote just completed a few days back. You have the URL there, and by September end, this product will be available for externally, and you can download and try it out in your own environment. So with that, I'm just going to pause here. I'm just going to throw this up there for you to fill out your survey. Basically, fill out your surveys. You should have that on your seats, and see if you have any questions. There was one question. Yeah. Actually, do you mind using the mic? I can barely hear you. By the way, as people are leaving, I just want to make a quick logistical announcement. On your way out, please collect this tab, semantic tab, and fill out your details and give it at the semantic booth. You'll be eligible for winning an iPad or an iPod for the next few days. Every day there'll be a drawing, so please pick this sheet up on your way out.
So just associated with the SQL piece, how does it handle the consistency of the data? If you had in-flight data and whatever happened that caused the app to drop, how does it handle the in-flight data?
Okay, so the question is, how do you ensure consistency at the database level, right? So from an application HA perspective, we are relying on SQL's crash recovery mechanism to recover from that. We're not necessarily trying to look at the data. We're just looking at the application state and trying to restart it. We'll just, SQL knows how to recover by rolling forward or rolling back the transactions that were in flight when the crash happened. And that should take care of the situation. Other questions? Right. So the question is, what's the advantage of using in-guest clustering? The use case of applying patches maybe to the application, is that a benefit, and are we going to address that with application HA? And I think the answer to both questions is yes. If you're trying to just failover the application, not the virtual machine, then yes, currently OS-based clustering will help you do that, with the additional complexity, of course, and not being able to use vMotion and things like that. We're currently looking at ways in which we can enable that, but using a totally different mechanism, and we can't talk about that a whole lot right now, but that will address that use case that you just described, but not force you to give up on vMotion and DRS, right? That's really the goal that we're working with VMware on. Good question. So how much is this exposed to Power CLI?
So the answer to that is today, none. So we will look at ways in which we can expose either so you're thinking of for the monitoring side. Yeah, so the API itself is not available publicly yet. However, once we make the SDK available publicly, then it'll be open to Power CLI, it'll be open to PowerShell, or it'll be open to Perl Toolkit, any of the API mechanisms and development kits that we have today.
So the question is, how extensive is the extensive? Okay. So for the applications that we support out of the box, we already understand a whole lot about the application. Like the example that I gave was on SQL, we'll just do synthetic SQL queries. You can certainly write your own agents that can do. We have a very simple model and an SDK that you can use to write your own agents, which can do extensively whatever you want. But for existing agents, we do provide some of the hooks where you can run scripts, let's say, before and after you start or stop an application, or in fact even replace some of the monitoring capabilities. So you can, if you wanted, you can even update some of the existing application agents. How is this licensed? It's per VM. No, so that's a good question. So the application HA part of the solution is available from Symantec, and you'd buy that separately from your VMware or vSphere licenses, which you buy from VMware. Yeah. But as soon as you put them together, you don't have to do anything. It just works.
And just to add, the API that we've exposed is actually available in all vSphere editions. Anywhere you've got HA, you've got the API. So you can add application HA on top of any of those bundles.
Correct.
Is there any performance concerns in terms of the added HA or traffic?
Yeah. It's a good question.
So the concerns are, performance once you start adding all of these heartbeats in. So in fact, this is actually a much more scalable mechanism than if you tried to drive all the heartbeats through a single channel, through a single network channel, because we're actually using the mechanisms that already exist between VM and host, and then we're leveraging as well the layer between the host and vCenter. So that channel already exists. This is not incrementally. It's not a significant amount of traffic as compared to what's already there.
Yeah. In our performance tests, it's taken less than 1% or 2% CPU utilization. Very, very small footprint on memory. It's really not doing a whole lot of, active operations. Yeah. Great. Any other questions? Sure. Okay. So I can start, and then maybe you can, or you want to take that?
Yeah, why don't I start? So the VMware HA setting, you have to have HA turned on. You have to have VM and application monitoring turned on for that cluster. And then from that point, you can install application HA, and then the settings for application HA are specific to the in-guest monitoring.
So it's designed in conjunction with VMware HA?
Yes.
Correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No overlap in settings. You can't set one in one place and override that setting somewhere else.
Is the dependency tree already predetermined, or can you customize it? Because with BCS, there's a simulator and you can create your own dependency trees.
Right.
Is this more a canned version, and it's already all pre-done?
So, for instance, if you look at SQL has a certain dependency and you want to extend that, you can do that today. It's not enabled through Virtual Center currently, just to keep things simple, but you can log into the guest OS and make those changes. But right now it's a little bit tedious. You would have to use either the interface you're familiar with VCS, the Java GUI, or you can use CLIs that come with VCS as well. So it's possible, it's just not exposed from vSphere client. Not yet.
So I think we may get kicked out of the room shortly, but we'll stick around to answer questions if folks have more questions.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.